Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I've got a full tank review for you on the Tier 7 Polish heavy tank. It is the 45 TP, also I believe called the Habicha. Now this is a very important tank along the Polish tank tree because it's the first heavy, and furthermore a lot of you will have had to have played through the 40 TP unless you have a lot of free experience, and you'll know just how painful it is to try and work your way through this tank. The 45 TP gives you an air of a Polish T29. But before any of you rush out right now to pick one up as quickly as you can, because let's be honest, the T29 is probably one of the best tanks tier for tier in the game, let's see how it stacks up to some of its competition and follow it up with some ace tanker gameplay. So here we have the Polish 45 TP in the tank in question on the left, the American T29 and also the Soviet IS. Immediately we notice that the damage per minute is right in the middle of these two vehicles and the penetration is decent. Slightly lower than that of the T29 but much higher than the IS. Now the alpha damage, 320, identical to the 105mm that the T29 is using, and that's because this vehicle also has a 105mm gun. Now one thing that feels really bad about this gun, however, is the shell velocity, 785 meters a second. Really doesn't feel like a high tier heavy, and it's only marginally better than the rather large caliber shells on the IS. When we move on to the gun handling though, the 45 TP looks absolutely awesome. 2.3 seconds aim time, 0.4 accuracy, the best here. Good dispersion values, the same as the IS, although this is not great by any means, 0.16, but at least it is substantially better than that of the T29, and 8 degrees of gun depression. Definitely not 10, but not as bad as the IS at 6. Now the mobility of the 40 TP at tier 6 was absolutely horrible, so I'm sure a lot of you are hoping that the 45 TP is going to be substantially faster. Well, not with regards to its forward speed, 35 limited and 14 backwards, although this is slightly faster than the T29, but the power to weight ratio is awesome, just under 17, that's great. And the ground resistances are better than that of the T29 on medium and soft, and identical to that of the IS. In fact, if you want to kind of preview the mobility of the 45 TP, just take an IS out onto the battlefield, it's going to give you 95% of the right idea. So far we've found out the vehicle has a pretty good gun for tier 7, it's got okay gun handling for a heavy tank and its mobility is decent. How about the armor? That's the most important thing on a heavy tank, right? Well, this is kind of really the downfall of the 45 TP. When you're not angling the tank at all, the whole of the front is 130 on the lower plate and 150, 160 millimeters of effective armor on the upper plate. And even if you angle the vehicle perfectly to the side like this, the upper plate never gets better than about 170. Yeah, that's not going to be ricocheting many tier 7 tanks, let alone your 8s and 9s. Although fairly effective against many tier 5 vehicles. The side armor on this tank is 50mm thick, which means that it's going to be able to work against all 150mm caliber guns and less. Just don't take your chances against any ISU 152s or Object 704s. That's when you're side scraping, of course. Next up, turret armor. When you're not angling the vehicle at all, about 200mm at the front on the mantlet here. In fact, this tank doesn't really have a mantlet when we look at it. That's not great news. All equal tier and higher tier tanks will be going through the front part of your vehicle fairly reliably, and it's got a god-awful cupola on top that anybody is going to pen. Now, the forehead of this tank is a bit bizarre, really. Look, whenever your tank enemy is slightly above you like this, it's an easy pen, but when they're on an equal playing field, or hopefully when you're using some of that gun depression, this is where the armor of the tank starts to get really good. In fact, when you're using the 8 degrees of gun depression this tank has, now the whole of your upper hull, even when not angled, and let's imagine you are angling a little bit here, is very good. This is going to be bouncing all tier 6 and 5 tanks reliably, and even many tier 7 tanks fairly reliably, and it's only the 8s and 9s that are going to challenge your 210mm of all-round frontal protection. But let's be honest, the tank does have some fairly stiff competition in the form of the T29, and yeah, when you get this thing hull down, this is true armor. Look, 300mm on the side, 280 on the thickest, well, on the thinnest part, I should say, of the mantlet there. And this turret is just godlike. Even when you angle the turret to the side here, it does pretty good over the most parts of the vehicle, and only right on the side here is it going to be very weak. Whereas for the 45 TP, as soon as you turn your turret to the side here, even tier 6 and 7 tanks are going to be contesting it. And so just when it was starting to look too good to be true for the 45 TP, we get a reality hit. That this tank's armor is not even going to be close to as efficient as that of the T29. So apart from that, the vehicle has 1,200 hit points, not really exceptional here. Something like a Tiger is packing 1,500 at tier 7 and 350 meters view range. This is a bit of a shocker for me. That means that you pretty much have to use binoculars on this vehicle if you want to have decent view range at long range, unless you've got an exceptional crew. But the T29 with 380 meters base view range can very much get away with using coated optics. But you know, I think that's quite enough theory crafting. Let's see how the 45 TP performs on the battlefield. So firstly, we're going to be rolling out in a nice matchup here on the Mountain Pass map. And there's lots of tier 5 tanks on the enemy team and some tier 7s and 6s that we're going to have to deal with as well. And that's important. I will be following it up with some higher tier gameplay so you can get an idea of how the tank also plays out there. But when you're in this kind of a matchup, you truly are a heavy. As I mentioned, you've got about 160 up to about 200 millimeters of effective frontal armor on this tank, and so in a matchup like this, you can actually try and risk it. You can risk your armor and you can sit in front of things, and even if they dab that 2 key, you're still going to be able to bounce them at least fairly reliably, although maybe the gameplay will tell. Also, must mention, there's a load of QSF players on our team here. Hey, Laptus and Marceran, awesome. Shout out to you guys in QSFC there. I say, hey, good luck, have fun. We'll see how it goes later on in this game. There might be a few spoilers ahead. Anyway, 45 TP, it's not the fastest, that's for sure. Not the slowest, at least you're not as slow as you were at tier 6 along the Polish line. And I have to admit, I guess I should save this for the conclusion, but this tank is just so much better than the tier 6. A lot of you will absolutely enjoy it, if not for the fact that you just had to play probably one of the most horrible tanks you will have ever had to experience at tier 6. So why aren't you going to enjoy this tank at tier 7, right? But does that still mean that it's going to be a great tank within its own regard, as we finish off that poor little tier 6 Soviet light tank? And you can take your chances with this vehicle. It doesn't have the best dispersion values, but remember, as you're using vertical stabilizer on this tank, it does improve that 0.16 turret dispersion a little bit. And the 2.3 seconds aim time means that you can be chancy with this vehicle, and I think you're going to have to be chancy as well. Because while the rate of fire isn't godlike, it's definitely not terrible, and so if you're not firing and just giving it a go and trying to make use of that fairly good aim time on the vehicle, you're definitely doing something wrong. Alright, so the battle line is drawn right across the middle of the map. We've killed 3, enemy team have killed 2. Make that 4 now, actually, for our team. And the Skoda T25 bounces 1 shell, I believe, off the side of our vehicle there and puts the second in. Now, I'm clearly being proxy spotted by the 25 TP down there on my left, but the Panther pushes around the corner, and I'm going to try and oblige by finishing him off. But with the Panther with the great rate of fire on that 75mm gun, he secures the kill on the 25 TP, and I venture forth to try and find the T-3485M, who fired an APCR shell at us. Bounces an AP shell this time, interestingly enough. And that time the Skoda also bounces off the front of our vehicle. I'm just trying to bait shells around the corner. One thing that I enjoy doing with this vehicle is you just basically leave the frontal part of your hull around the corner when you're in a matchup like this, and you can do very well indeed. So it looks like the Leffe on my team nearly hit me. Just a little bit of a splash, thank goodness. What I'm saying is if you come around the corner and you just bait your enemies into shooting you, you only do this against tier 5s and tier 6s, however, because the lower plate is truly terrible on this tank, and most of the equal and high tier vehicles will be able to punish it. But oh, this is the dream right now. We lock down the KV-13, we turn our attention to the KV-1S to make sure the KV-1S isn't going to be shooting us, and we're going to put another one in there, and it doesn't even find our tracks. Oh, juicy, tasty stuff. This is the top tier medium tank on the enemy team, who'd already picked up 3 kills by now that we just shut down. Now the KV-1S is using the derp gun, that 122mm derp, and the ELC just fired a 90mm premium round that didn't manage to go through the front of our tank. So far, great news for the 45 TP, right? T67 bouncing off at the back as well. This is what you can do in this vehicle. You can just be aggressive. I think about shooting at the ELC, but I want to finish off this KV-1S instead. I'm going to come around the corner and put a shot right into the upper part of the back of the hull. Now we spot the T67. Our coated optics not activated because we're not using them. We're using binoculars here, and so we don't see the guy for a little bit too long. I still think that you should probably use binoculars on this vehicle. It's your only way to really spot for yourself at very long ranges with the 350 meters base view range that the tank has. And we shut down the T67 on the enemy team. We're just waltzing through the enemy team as you would expect in this kind of garbage 357 matchmaker system that we have at the moment. Alright, so the Leffe nails us from above. I decide that it's time to make my way back towards the base because we see there's a T-29 there and there's also an Su-100M1 who we don't exactly know where he is. He hasn't been spotted yet, as a matter of fact. Hasn't got a kill. But seeing how there's someone in the cap circle, either that is the T-29 or that is the Su-100M1. But I'm not really too concerned because unless the T-29 slips into the cap circle right now, we have 3 tanks making it towards the cap circle. And, oh, well, make that... No, still 3 tanks because the Leffe just killed the IKV. So I'm thinking, nice, easy days here. We're going to get 2 or 3 tanks inside the cap and we should easily be able to win this game, right? Because the T-29 has decided to come out and fight me. This is going to be straightforward. Oh, God, though. But the Leffe just got a kill on the 25 TP. But as long as we get 2 tanks in the cap circle within the next 10 seconds, it's an easy win, right? I'm pinging the cap. Why aren't they capping? Okay, 1 person's capping. We just literally need to get the M4 into the cap circle in the next few seconds. Oh my God, Laptus, what are you doing, my friend? Oh no. I think Laptus was just typing to me saying I couldn't do anything this map instead of going inside the cap circle. I think he thought that the game was over. The game was clearly not over. And so that means now I'm going to have to interrupt the Su-100M1 if I'm to win this game. What a disaster. But this is it. T-29 versus T-29. Oh, no, not T-29, against the Polish T-29. And I low roll. I leave him on 1 health, would you believe it? But I guess that's what I deserve for firing premium rounds at the front of this tank. Anyway, that engagement went exceptionally well. We had to shoot that guy 1, 2, 3, 4 times. He managed to shoot us 3 times, although we did bounce the first shot, and that's why he dabbed the 2. But unfortunately, I believe that 1 health that we left the T-29 on and the fact that he locked us down there. Oh, we got 4, 3, 2, 1, and we don't manage to find the SU because he's in the correct position and we bounce off his upper hull anyway. Oh dear goodness gracious. Well, mistakes were made, but can't be too sad about it. We picked up a top gun here and did a whopping amount of damage, and I think this was a very good game for just showing what the 45 TP can do inside a great matchup. I've been there, I've done that. Laptus, don't take it too painfully, buddy. I've quite often sat there thinking, the game's over when you kill the last tank, and then you realize, oh wait, there's 2 tanks left on the enemy team. Although, considering somebody was in the cap circle, hopefully that alarm was going off on your head. Anyway, that was the 45 TP in a good matchup. Let's see how it performs in not such a good one. Alright, so this time against tier 9 tanks on mines. What do I want to do? It's an encounter. Well, I love protecting the cap circle on mines encounter, but also the hill is just so tempting to venture forth. And now that Wargaming have made changes so the enemy team can kind of get up there at the same speed, I feel like it's not really guaranteed that the northern team is going to be able to take the hill. So I want to push forwards and see if I can get a shot maybe into the SP-1C, maybe into the Skoda T50, or even the LTTB or the Pantera who have managed to be spotted here. So the LTTB is chasing down my 1390, so I'm going to turn my attention towards him, and I'm going to try and get a snapshot at him. Now, I don't think my team really needed the help there. I think the 1390 would have been able to probably finish it off. But nevertheless, first kill for the 45 TP. Now, it wasn't really too slow up that slope, right? This is definitely going to get into position faster than the T29 is. And so I really want you to try and take that into account. Think about when we could use the extra gun depression or the extra turret armor that the T29 has. And let's think about when the extra engine power of the 45 TP allows it to do things that the T29 couldn't. For example, in that last game, I know that that's in the past now, but we did have the engine power to be able to whip our way through that flank and just be able to get back. We didn't really need the armor in that situation. Even if I've been in the T29, the hull is garbage on that tank, and I don't think there were many occasions where I could only expose my turret. But when you're in a matchup like this, how good is the 120 millimeters of hull armor going to be on this tank? Or shall I say about the 180 millimeters of effective armor that this tank has? Skoda misses us. I'm going to try and put 1 in there. Looks like we hit the Skoda. And I don't think the Skoda can spot me right now, but I realize this is pretty stupid in retrospect, and I allow him to shoot me once. But my binoculars activate, which means that I can spot him at long range. And I put another round in there for 303 damage and 279 spotting. So we just took off pretty much about 60% of the hit points there of a higher tiered, 2 tiers higher medium. Just because obviously we had the binos on the vehicle, and because we can hit fairly hard, and it was still challenging for him to be able to penetrate at long range. And that might be pushing it actually a little bit when I say that with the 45 TP. I think the 240 millimeters of penetration that the Skoda T50 has is more than enough to obliterate this vehicle. Nevertheless, we have used our mobility to be able to get into an important location on mines, and that is this dip up here. If you can control this dip, you can usually control the game. Now, of course, there are 2 artillery on the enemy team that we're going to have to watch out for, but I'm just hoping that maybe I can get forwards and slap this IS, although I did notice there's a charioteer skulking around the map, so I'm going to have to watch out for where the charioteer is, and there he is, exactly where I thought the charioteer might be. We're unable to hit him. He pulls back just before we manage to zero in a target on the vehicle. But yeah, don't want to get hit too many times. I can get 2-shot pretty much by that charioteer if he rolls slightly high. And the artillery, obviously a constant threat to this tank as well. So what am I going to do? Well, I can't really depress my gun enough to be able to get that IS and the VK from up here. So I'm going to try and use this position instead, see if we can find the charioteer. And oh dear, we found a Foch right ahead there. That auto-loading French tank destroyer is incredibly dangerous for us to get caught out by. So I want to get forwards here, but the T-44 is just reversing. Looks like he avoids a shell from the Foch or alternatively some kind of other vehicle down at the back of the map. Well, unless the Pantera or the T-54 Lightweight have flanked, there aren't too many more vehicles to worry about. So now I'm going to make my way over here, go try and reverse a little bit, realize that 8 degrees of gun depression, not enough to be able to depress, to be able to get this T-54 Lightweight. But we put one into the back of him, hoping to get another one, and actually it looks like 8 degrees is enough. I could have just reversed back here and not had to expose so much of my tank. And will we shut him down? No, we won't, because I could only hit his turret, and that tier 9 light tank has great armor. We're unable to finish him off, but we go over the slope hoping to be able to finish him off, and wow, big mistakes there. We get slapped once by the Foch, we get slapped by the T-54 Lightweight from below. Wow, there goes my hit points, right? But talking about hit points, let's see if we can remove them from some of this tier 8 American self-propelled gun on the enemy team. But unfortunately, Wargaming's rock modeling denies me the damage against that higher tiered self-propelled gun. So, 45 TP. Whoa, at least the artillery finishes that artillery off. Good stuff there. And only 1 self-propelled gun left on the enemy team to worry about. But with 197 hit points left, and the fact that we're ahead by 9 kills, I'm just thinking about trying to get as much experience out of this game as I possibly can. And yeah, let's go for it. And oh god, I overcommitted. But watch this. Physics. Okay, ladies and gents, somehow the 45 TP just bounced. It bounced and it only took 135 damage. I don't know how that happened, but I'm quite happy that it did, because it means that I managed to complete a mission there with the kill on the VK. I don't quite manage to reload in time for the charioteer, and my team just go on to kill the artillery at the end of this game. How ridiculous. But look, this game, very representative of how you're going to have to play in those high-tier matchups. You can't really rely on your armor, as you can see. Even though I didn't try to make the best of it in this game, I didn't block a single shell. And to all intents and purposes, this is more of a medium tank. And now, it's very frustrating to not have those extra 2 degrees of gun depression that T-29 has, and the turret armor. I usually sit out in front of anything in that tank apart from, your real dangerous tank destroyers. And I will rely on that turret armor to keep me in the game. It's something you just can't do with this vehicle. And with 8 degrees, you're just so much more limited than you are with 10. But you've got the extra mobility. It's a tough one. So our first round on Mountain Pass was our ace tanker for the 45 TP. Steel Wall, a high caliber, and a Top Gun. Those 3 hero medals gave us courageous resistance, which nailed enough experience to be able to squeak into the ace tanker rankings there. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like Laptors had the best game, boys and girls. But let's not dwell on that. Now, we did lose some credits here, even with a premium account, because I resupplied the Tea at full price that you've got in this tank. Actually, sorry, no, that's the Czechoslovakian consumable. This is the Smarlets, right? And I've got to buy some in the next sale because that is brutal paying 20k a game. I only like to pay 10k a game. All right, next up on mines. No battle hero medals here, but we finish way on top via experience, 1,241. We even finished second on damage. And in the worst kind of matchup, in fact, look, it was also the AMX M445 who finished on top of damage here. What's up with our tier 7 tanks carrying, our tier 7 heavies carrying in this game? We also managed to get quite a lot of damage upon detecting. One of the reasons why I like to use binoculars in this vehicle and not coated optics, because 350 is just not enough to get those long range spots. And this time, because we didn't fire any premium rounds, we make a profit even with the Smarlets resupply. So the 45 TP, all in all, what do I think about this tank? Well, look, it's not terrible. The 40 TP is terrible at tier 6. This tank, it's playable. You're going to perfectly well have some fun. You've got some variety. I love the tier spread. Tier 5 to tier 9 is so different. How you can play in a top tier tank in this tank is just bizarre in comparison to how you have to play against those tier 9 vehicles. So I actually felt like that gave me a lot of variety when I was playing this tank. But still, I didn't really enjoy it. There's two things that I really don't like on this tank. Number one, the lack of turret armor, the lack of that 10 degrees of gun depression, basically the lack of the T29 strengths. And I just don't feel that the mobility, the slight rate of fire, and the slight accuracy advantage that this tank has makes up for it. This vehicle effectively sacrifices the things that you'd need to be really good in a tier 9 game to have more mobility that makes you exceptional in a good matchup, I'd say. And so at least for me, it's not even going to come close to replacing a T29. But nevertheless, just because a vehicle doesn't stack up to one of the most powerful tanks tier for tier in the game, by no means makes it a poor tank. The 45 TP, it's just going to be about being this all-round, fast, heavy. You're going to play a lot like the IS does. But one thing's for sure, this is where the Polish tech tree really starts to get into its stride, and you can't really go wrong with this vehicle, and you're really going to have a good, long, hard look at your entire gameplay if you're not being successful in it. Nevertheless, as a jack of all trades and master of none, I think it's also quite hard to truly fall in love with this vehicle, as it just never finds its niche in any matchup. Anyway, ladies and gents, that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, or maybe it was just useful to you. If it was, please give it a thumbs up, but if you hated it, make sure you give it a thumbs down, and let me know in the comments what you think about the 45 TP. Have you got one yourself? Have you really enjoyed it? Did you absolutely loathe it? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.